Welcome to week 2 of the Mindfulness in Politics podcast, where we are helping folks who work in fields like politics, advocacy, and media figure out how to reduce stress, make their work more resilient, and deal with some of the craziness of the world in better ways. And Igor, in the first couple of weeks of our project, we've really focused on ways that people can use mindfulness-based practices to make themselves, frankly, a bit more sane as they're carrying out their work and not let it impact their lives in really problematic ways. But today we want to flip the script just a bit and focus on the ways that these practices actually can make you a whole lot better at your job.
Yeah, this isn't just about using mindfulness when you're in some kind of work crisis or an emergency, although those are great use cases as well, right? When you can calm yourself down and hopefully operate from a place of greater calm. What we want to talk about here is how a constant practice of mindfulness can actually make you better at your job. It can help you make better decisions. It can help you pay better attention. It can help regulate your emotions. Josh and I have experienced that firsthand, but there's also a whole lot of science that explains how meditation can actually strengthen the parts of our brain that are responsible for all of that really important decision making, emotional regulation components.
For sure. And I think that folks kind of differ in this, and that some people don't really care how this works as long as it works. They're just want something that's effective. And other people really want to know what's going on under the hood that makes this work. And in some future weeks, we're going to dive into some of the mechanisms of why this is believed to be effective, from regulation of various stress hormones and dopamine to strengthening of certain neural pathways. But for now, we want to focus on the fact that a ton of scientifically backed research, randomized control studies, shows that there are real cognitive effects as a result of these mindfulness-based practices and interventions, especially when it comes to things like regulating our emotions and sustaining our attention for long periods.
In my life, there have been so many instances where the practice of mindfulness has really opened my eyes to the reality that we don't have to be caught in these knee jerk reactions. We don't always have to be going down these well worn highways when we are triggered in some way or are about to make a decision, basically like on automatic. We can step back, take a moment, pause. There's so much power in that pause, and just reevaluate. Do we want to go down the pathway we've always gone down? Maybe. Or do we want to try something else? And Josh, I remember so clearly, this was a couple of months ago. I was in the car and I got an email from some folks on my team. And the email was questioning a kind of core decision we had made about our project and how it was going to function. And up until that point, I thought, okay, we were all on the same page and moving forward. But they were wondering, given something that had happened, maybe we should reconsider. And I look down and I see the same question that, again, I thought we had decided this already. And I could feel immediately my anxiety spike. I could feel some stress coming up, like, oh, why are we still addressing this? And I started typing up an answer of like, no, we already decided this. Let's just move forward. And right before I hit send, I just took a step back. I took a breath and I thought, well, maybe they're right. Maybe we should reconsider. And so I ended up putting forward a much softer response that left room for maybe making some changes. And eventually, I was so happy that I did because we were able to make some adjustments and I think got to a better place as a result. But that wouldn't have happened if I had just let my brain remain on autopilot, make that kind of knee jerk reaction, and not taken the moment to really look around and consider some of my options. To me, my ability to take that step back is really rooted in the practice of mindfulness and being more aware of our thoughts, of our emotions, instead of letting those thoughts and emotions always control us.
Yeah, and for me, I found that one of the most profound ways that these practices have made me better at my job has to do with sustained attention. So, as a journalist, and particularly working on fast-paced beats like the White House, war coverage, presidential campaigns, which have been kind of my bread and butter. There's a real premium on being able to do a whole lot of things at once for very short amounts of time. You're juggling multiple stories, you're taking new pieces of information that are coming at you. You have to integrate them super quickly, hit the quick article or the TV hit and then move on. Because otherwise you get caught behind the curve and behind the news cycle. And that's a real skill, but what I found is after many years of doing that, my ability to sustain my attention in an effective way on one task for a long period of time became much more difficult. And I started to like less and less the times when I had to really dive into a deep project because it felt like I got so restless that I could barely just sit still and really put my all into a project. And the more and more that I practice these awareness based mindfulness practices, the more I find that I've really trained myself to be able to sit even with that restlessness, to take some of that crazy energy that's floating around and redirect it back into whatever project I'm working on, and really be able to sustain a sharp and productive attention for longer periods of time. That's both better for the resulting work product, but also makes me feel less just kind of frazzled at the end. And that has been a huge benefit for me.
Before I ever started practicing mindfulness or thinking about any of this, I started my career in rapid response,
Right.
where, as you're describing, you have to like figure out some kind of reply seconds after something happened. And I did that work for many, many years. I mean, close to 8 years is really how I began my career. And I would tell people, working in rapid response has really rewired my brain in the sense that I now feel the need to immediately be able to come back with something without taking a moment to, as you say, sit in any kind of discomfort or give any kind of consideration. And you can imagine that, and it's a literal rewiring, right? Because our brains can really change based on our thoughts, based on what we do, based on how we use our brain, how this need to make really quick snap decisions can impact all kinds of different areas of our life for better or for worse. And now, as my work has really shifted away from rapid response and I get to be a lot more thoughtful, a lot more critical, I really see that that has also really altered how I make decisions. And you layer the practice of mindfulness on top of that, and I'm really in a very different place than when I started my career. But the good news here is that this notion of neuroplasticity, that you can change the way your mind processes information and how you react to that information or that stimuli, is really what's so exciting.
Yeah, and I think we also might want to add that when we're talking about changing, the nature or structure in your brains, this is all additive. You're not losing something here. The way to think about it is basically like working out in the gym and gaining new muscle that you didn't have before. There's no loss of function in some other part of the body that occurs as a result of that. So you're strengthening pathways between one network in the brain or the other. You're advancing and enhancing your ability to regulate your emotions, to regulate some of the neurotransmitters that lead to these crazy anxiety spirals. But you're not fundamentally changing your ability to do anything else that also might be important in your life. And so it's really empowering in that way, that you can strengthen things that are important that make you more effective, without having to be concerned that it's going to make you lose effectiveness or lose some other part of you that you also really value.
Yeah, that's such a great point. You're really adding on to. You're not subtracting, as you say. We're going to get to the science-y pieces of this later on. Maybe we'll bring on somebody who actually understands and has a background in neurology and brain function to really break it down for us. But for now, maybe the thing to say, and this was so helpful for me to understand early on when somebody explained to me that neuroplasticity, this kind of rewiring, really happens when we're in meditation practice, right? We're told to focus on our breath or a sound or some other kind of anchor. And we're trying to do that, right? We're focusing on our breath, we're focusing on our breath. And then inevitably, because this is the way all of our brains operate, we wander off and we think about some to do list item, or we think about whatever concern or worry we have that's animating our day. And as soon as we realize, oh, we've drifted away, we come back. That's what we're taught to do. We come back to that breath, to that anchor. And it's the act of coming back to the breath that builds that attention muscle. And that was so important, Josh, for me to understand, because oftentimes, especially when we're starting out in meditation, we think, oh my God, I can't focus on my breath. My brain is 1,000 miles a minute. So many thoughts are popping up. I'm really not good at this. This isn't for me, which is how I thought about this for a very long time. But you can also think of it differently, right? You can think of it as an opportunity to come back to the anchor. And in that opportunity, you actually get the added benefit of strengthening your attention muscle. So you're not failing when you have to come back to your breath. You're actually building and adding a new ability and capacity.
Yeah, exactly. And just to encapsulate that in a bit of a different way, instead of when you realize that you've gotten totally sidetracked and lost the focus and awareness that you're hoping to cultivate, instead of viewing that as, shoot, that is an evidence that I have failed in this regard. Actually, as soon as you realize that you have been distracted and have gotten off track, you are now aware again. You are now mindful and present, because otherwise you'd still be distracted. And so every time you actually realize that you've gotten off track, that is a victory in being able to have a level of insight into the workings of your own mind and your own attention that you didn't have before. So that is something to be applauded, and frankly is a sign of progress. So we're going to have a lot more coming up on these different ways that mindfulness is proving effective, particularly for people who are in these high stress, high intensity and fast paced career fields. And we want to hear what's working for you. We, as Igor said, are not the experts in neuroscience, but we are certainly finding a lot of this really effective in our own lives and in that of our colleagues in these fields. And we look forward to sharing more with you as we continue with the Mindfulness in Politics project.